What is modern garden rose? While there are a few definitions that I've seen, I'm going to go with a definition of any rose that belongs to any class that came in existence in 1867 or later. I did a video on all garden roses that cover the roses that belong to classes prior to 1867. I'll put a link in the comments for that below. On to the general different types of modern roses. The first class I'm going to talk about are called the hybrid teas, which this rose that you're looking at now is not, but it will be shortly. Um, the hybrid teas generally are accepted to begin in 1867 with the rose La France. However, at the time it was labeled in different classes, such as hybrid bourbons, possibly even hybrid perpetual. La France has pointed buds, but the flowers hold the old garden roses form, a globular. The classic hybrid tea florist rose form came into existence more or less around 1945 with the peace rose. High pointed bud, cut usually before it opens all the way. Kind of opens in a muddled form though for a lot of them. But the peace rose was the one that changed what from the old garden globular form of La France to what we now consider as hybrid teas and florist roses. Hybrid teas generally are considered singular flowered stems, but this does not mean that they're always. They can often have clusters in them, but that's usually not what's shown as show quality flowers. The next group that I want to talk about is called the Floribundas. The Floribundas started in the early 1900s-ish, and they're clustered flower usually as opposed to the solitary flower of the hybrid teas. They were formed by the crossing of hybrid teas and Polyanthas. One of the more famous ones is Iceberg, which is one of the few Floribundas that I've actually grown. To me, when I see a Floribunda, usually I see it less petaled and more open than hybrid teas, but that's not always the case. They also have a tendency to be shorter than hybrid teas do. The next group that I want to talk about are called Grandifloras, which resulted from crossing hybrid trees and Floribundas. The first Grandiflora was Queen Elizabeth. Usually this category is taller than both the hybrid teas and Floribundas, or can get taller, but that doesn't always have to be the case. I have read in several places that this classification of roses possibly should be looked at and dissolved into like the hybrid teas and Floribundas, whichever rose it more closely relates to. This class can have either solitary or clustered flower roses, and both are fine. The next class would be miniature roses. Ralph Moore did a lot of work on miniature roses, started a business doing miniature roses predominantly. Rise and Shine is one of his more long-lasting famous roses. And he just introduced stripes into miniature roses, and he did miniature mosses and a whole bunch of miniature. A lot of miniature roses on the market now either were created by him or have a rose in their background that was created by him. They have tend to be really small. They do well in pots. I have one. I haven't grown a whole lot, so I can't say a whole lot more about them, but that is the basics of general miniature roses. They usually have little hybrid tea type flowers, come in multiple colors. The next group I'd like to talk about is hybrid musks. Joseph Pemberton was considered the founder of this class. John Benthall did a lot of work on it as well. I've grown one, which was Penelope, so I don't have a lot of experience with them. Oftentimes they are open flowered, but there are roses such as Buff Beauty that have a little bit more petals than singular. They can either be medium-sized bushes. I've seen some as climbers. They come in multiple colors. I've often seen them in like a apricot, which is Penelope-ish. or I guess apricot-ish for Penelope. Also, Buff Beauty is a yellowy color is what I describe it as. Um, Hybrid musks fall into a category, into a general category called shrubs. The shrub category, which is a category I'd like to talk about as well, is the catch-all category. It's the one that doesn't fit into the little garden, doesn't fit into hybrid teas, Floribundas, Grandifloras, miniatures. If the rose doesn't fit in one of those categories, it's considered a shrub. So hybrid musks, David Austin's, Polyanthas. I'm sure there's a couple that I'm not grabbing as well. But shrubs are, just keep in mind, it can be any type of rose. I guess not climber, because a climber is a category in and of itself. But that just doesn't fit into the neat little buckets that have been defined as classifications. The next group I'd like to talk about is the English roses, or David Austin roses. The first one was Constant Spray by David Austin in 1960-ish. It wound up being a once blooming, predominantly climbing rose. I'm not going to rehash the history of the David Austin roses. He wrote a lot of books about it. A quick synopsis: he wanted to combine the old-fashioned flower form with the modern repeat and colors. For him, his second rose was Chianti. It was also once blooming though, but then after that he introduced repeat blooming roses. A lot of the older roses have now been replaced, unfortunately, which that's another subject for another day. The newer David Austin roses, to me at least, seem to have lost the charm of the older roses, such as the Reeve, Graham Thomas, Abraham Darby. In my opinion, the newer roses look like they're trying way too hard to fit into the mainstream rose garden. In my opinion, Tottering by Gently looks a whole heck of a lot like Sunny Knockout. There are roses that he did well with getting the modern colors, such as Pat Austin and Lady of Shalott, sorry. But overall, I like the older David Austin roses better than the newer ones. The next group of roses I'd like to talk about are the Polyantha roses. They came about by crossing multiflora roses with China roses, usually cluster flowering roses that repeat. They were then also crossed, as I mentioned earlier, with hybrid trees forming the Floribunda group. I've grown a couple, the Fairy, Cecile Brunner. The Cecile Brunner has a miniature hybrid tea form look to it. The Fairy Rose does not have that miniature hybrid tea look to it. It's got a more globular. Oftentimes you'll find Cecile Brunner and Pearl d'Or, which is another Polyantha, in cemeteries. And just look around, you can see a whole bunch of classes. Thanks for watching the video, and have a good day.